Horror Stories from the Silent Crib. Have you ever heard the stories whispered in hushed tones about the little ones who aren't so innocent after all? About the cribs that sit in dark corners of nurseries, silent but ever watchful, waiting for something that shouldn't be waiting. These are the stories that never get told at bedtime. But tonight, I'll share one with you. It was a rainy evening when Laura and Matt brought their newborn son, Adam, home from the hospital. The house they had moved into was old, but charming. A typical countryside home with creaking floors and windows that rattled when the wind blew. They had spent weeks preparing for Adam's arrival, painting the nursery in soft pastels, setting up the crib, and arranging the stuffed animals that would keep him company. But no matter how much they tried to make it perfect, there was something unsettling about that crib. It wasn't the kind of crib you'd expect to see in a home filled with love and warmth. It was large, wooden, with ornate carvings. Too ornate, like it had been made for someone else, someone much older. But they pushed the feeling aside. After all, it was Adam's crib now. On the first night, after putting their son to bed, Laura and Matt sat in the living room, sipping tea, enjoying the rare, quiet moment. The storm outside grew louder, the wind howling through the trees. Suddenly, they heard it, the faintest sound coming from the nursery. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, like a creak of wood against wood. "Did you hear that?" Matt asked, his eyes wide. Laura nodded. "It's probably just the wind." But when they listened more closely, the creak sounded different. It wasn't the wind. It was rhythmic. A soft rocking motion, like someone was gently pushing the crib. Matt stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'll go check on him." Laura watched as he made his way down the hallway. The nursery door was slightly ajar, and when Matt pushed it open, a chill ran down his spine. The crib was still. Adam was sleeping soundly, wrapped in his blanket. Nothing was amiss. "Just the wind," Matt muttered, but even as he spoke, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, as if something else was present, something ancient, something that had been waiting. The next few days passed uneventfully, but Laura couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Every time she walked past the nursery, she felt it, the weight of unseen eyes. The crib, too, seemed to have a life of its own. Whenever she stood by it, she noticed the carved faces on the wood seemed to watch her, their eyes following her movements, silently judging. It wasn't until the third night that things took a terrifying turn. Around midnight, Laura woke to the sound of crying. But it wasn't Adam's cry. It was a strange, muffled sound, like a baby, but not quite. It was coming from the nursery. She sat up in bed, her heart racing, and glanced over at Matt. He was still asleep, unaware. Her feet hit the cold floor, and she tiptoed down the hallway. The sound grew louder as she approached the nursery, but something was wrong. The door was wide open now. She hesitated before stepping inside, her breath shallow, her body frozen in place. The nursery was darker than usual, the shadows deeper. The crib, she noticed, was moving, rocking gently back and forth, as if someone were pushing it. Laura stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat. And then she saw it. A figure, a small, pale child, was standing beside the crib. The figure was wearing a tattered nightgown, its face hidden in the shadows, but the eyes, those eyes gleamed with an unnatural brightness. They were black, voids of nothingness, swallowing all light. Laura felt a surge of fear grip her chest, her heart pounding painfully against her ribs. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound, but its presence was overwhelming. And then it turned its head slowly toward her. "Mommy," a voice whispered, soft, eerily familiar, but wrong. Laura's breath hitched. It was Adam's voice, but he wasn't standing there. He was lying in the crib, his tiny body still and quiet. The figure in the corner, the ghostly child, reached out a hand toward her, and as it did, Laura felt an ice-cold wind rush past her, sending a chill deep into her bones. She stumbled backward, terrified. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed to the floor, her mind racing. "Matt," she screamed, but no sound came out. The air was thick, suffocating, pressing down on her. Suddenly, a loud, forceful creak echoed through the room, the sound of the crib rocking violently, as if something invisible was trying to break free. The lights flickered, and for a split second, Laura saw the figure again, standing next to Adam's crib, its eyes burning into her very soul. The room felt like it was closing in, the walls bending inward. "Leave us alone," she managed to whisper, her voice